Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Han. Han, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on here, Ben.
I am really excited for the conversation. This is going to be something for me to really catch up on what I've missed out for the last couple of years. So I'm excited to learn from you. But before we dive into the subject, a couple things we always love to ask. Number one, let's get caught up on your work career and history, some of that stuff. And second, why do you love content and marketing?
Yeah, so I've been a marketer for going on 14 years now, which is hard to believe now that I say that out loud. I've worked in mostly B2B spaces at small to medium-sized companies. So as you can imagine, I've worn a lot of hats in my day. I'm kind of the Jane of all trades, and pretty much everything in marketing I've done at or dabbled in at one point or another. So that covers, writing PRs and managing websites and heading content strategy and doing a little bit of PMM and webinars. That's my scope of work covers quite a bit. Content is very near and dear to my heart because it has a lot to do with everything in marketing, right? They say content is king for a reason. And, in the last couple of years, with really the explosion of AI and content generation tools out there, the content that you produce needs to really stand out. So that's why when you reached out, Ben, about Content Allies, I thought it was a really interesting segue into how to tie demand gen with content.
I love it. And again, I'm excited for this. I spent so much of my career in demand generation and left to start a SaaS business, and I've been doing that for over 2 years. So Han, what's changed in the last 2 years? What does demand generation look like now? What have I missed out in for, that time?
Yeah. A lot's changed in the last couple years. ChatGPT, with the rise of AI tools is just one thing that I mentioned. But I will say it has fundamentally changed marketing as a whole, and not just B2B, not just B2C, but it kind of changes the way that marketers are graded and the way that they operate. So let's go back to content a little bit, just because it's at the core of so much demand generation. I truly believe that building good content is the best way to build trust with your brand and your customers. And you need to produce high quality content. It has to be informative and has to genuinely help your audience, whether that's addressing a challenge they have, the next step that they want to take their programs, whatever that may be. And content generation tools have provided like an amplification for demand gen marketers. So for example, I use, like before, it would take me hours to write a blog post and get it reviewed and make sure to, do all the sources. Now I can generate a blog post, give it prompt guidelines, and it'll get me 30% of the way there, which is a great starting point, right? It doesn't have the same brand and voice, and it can't do exactly what I can do, but it gives me a great starting point and improves my productivity. But, if you start creating content that you don't proofread, that, it starts sounding very similar to all the other content out there, you'll get dinged by Google, you'll get dinged by search engines and start sounding like everyone else. So you got to be real careful when you use tools like that because you want to stay true to your brand. So that's just, one piece of it, the content piece. And SEO's, like I mentioned, it's gotten a lot harder, right? Search engines have gotten smarter how to filter out generated content. That means you need to be specific to what your company has to offer when you try to rank on Google for search, optimizing search engines. So that's the content piece aside. There's a few other buckets of the things that have changed in demand gen in the last few years. The second is being very targeted. I think this is because I used to work for SMB and target like mid-markets. And the last two companies I've worked for targets enterprise, which means our sales cycle is anywhere from 2 months to 18 months. And you have to focus on specialized messaging. The spraying and praying tactic does not work anymore. like my inbox, I have 200 emails before I open up my inbox every single day, and only specialized messaging catered to my problem is going to get me to open or get my attention, whether that's ads, whether that's on LinkedIn, et cetera, whatever channel. So making sure that your campaigns are targeted, whether that's in organic or email or PPC channels, it has become really, really important. You have to make sure that if you have a tool with intent data, you need to understand your prospects' buying intent and where they're in their evaluation journey. If they're just curious about you, there's a different way to nurture. If they're raising their hand and they want a demo, they want a trial, you need to treat them a different way. So making sure that your nurture journeys are specifically divided out and catered to where they are in the evaluation journey.
I love it. So one quick question for you with the email side of things. So you talked about how content can build trust and really add value. And you also mentioned you've got 200 emails, and really you're not going to open most of those because they're all spam, and AI is
Correct.
Increasing the rate of spam email we're getting. But I'm guessing if someone had high quality content that built trust with you, would that increase the likelihood that you would open their email at the same time? How does that play a role?
100%. So there are exceptions, right? There are brands that I follow that, I would love to either purchase from one day or emulate, like I take inspiration from them. So I'll give you an example. I really like Intercom as a brand, right? They make really great content. They don't, they have just the right cadence. Anytime I get an email from them, I'm at least opening it because they've built enough trust with me over the last 5 years, where I know that if an email is going to my inbox, it's of value to me. That's the kind of trust that you want to build with your end customers. Instead of sending them an email every day or every other day, it's going to be white noise to them.
Yeah, I love it. Sorry, I cut you off before. You were going to another point. I don't want to stop the roll.
No, of course. The last piece I would mention is what's changed in demand gen is I feel like AI tools have given me the ability to increase productivity. So I really encourage all marketers to get familiar with AI tools that will make their lives easier. So the best example I can take is I was evaluating, 10, 12 different conferences last year. And we've never participated in these conferences. The event organizer gave me a list of companies that are attending and nothing else, no job titles. I wanted to see if this list fit our ICP, our ideal customer profile. So I took the list, I ran it into Gemini, which is Google's AI tool. It's free. I threw in a list. I asked for revenue band. I labeled it SMB, mid-market, or enterprise. Gemini spit this list back in 30 seconds, whereas it would have taken me 2 hours to manually populate this information last year. So they sorted this into a nice table. I copied it over to Google Sheets. I did a V lookup, and I thought, wow, there's actually 75% of people in our ICP attending this event, so it's worth checking out. And this is just one example of many where AI has significantly augmented my ability to move quickly in a way that was not possible previously. So, like I said, get curious and comfortable using AI tools. I know that it's kind of scary because there are a lot of tools out there and it can get overwhelming, but that's just one example out of many that has really helped make my job easier.
I love that. That's so good. There's so much to unwrap there. So when you're looking at 2024 and your demand gen efforts, what are you investing more in and what are you kind of divesting from? So what's the mix starting to look like and shape out to be? Where are the effort and time? Where is it going? Where is it beneficial nowadays?
Yeah. I can't speak broadly because every company is different, but I will share what I'm spending my time on and where I'm, kind of backing away. So areas that I'm moving away from are, I kind of hinted at this earlier, spray and pray tactics. Generic content and mass emailing are just not effective anymore because audiences crave personalization and relevance to themselves. So it's consumer expectation increasing and their demand. They want focused marketing. And I found that persona specific campaigns work better when you're addressing a particular challenge. So instead of, putting everyone into the same bucket, it's better to spend that extra time and create, an IT cadence or, create messaging that will affect your product marketers because it will speak to them more. I've also started to, with all the AI tools and analytics tools out there as well, I'm able to glean into which programs are wasting, resources or money. And it's better to invest in attracting high quality leads, even if they're more expensive, because these are the buyers. So caring less about quantity and more about quality is, super important for DG, especially in enterprise, right? And then lastly, events have been doing really well for us. And I say this with caution because after COVID, in the past 3 years, events were just not a thing. And they started to come back, and they can be really expensive. I have, spent $100,000 at an event in the past and, barely yielded enough to cover the ROI for that event. So we've realized that finding specific events at a, finding your audience at a smaller event is worth an investment. So we have a rule. We don't spend over, $11K per event, but we need to see X amount of return in order for every dollar that we put in. So that's been going really well so far.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, before COVID, events was a huge strategy and It was massive. People would go to hundreds of events, but I think it has shifted to the more specific events. We can't just rely on those in 2024, but there's still a great opportunity to get in front of our target market in a non-spammy, really organic relationship building way that's really unique to only being in person with someone. And I think there's a lot of value there.
It's true.
So when you're looking at 2024, what are some of the biggest trends that you're seeing? Not necessarily stuff you're doing specifically, and it may be things you're doing, but are you noticing any big trends in the space, whether it be social media? Obviously, AI is a big part of it, but what are some of those big things you're noticing?
I think data-driven marketing has fundamentally shifted. Leveraging, automation and analytics tools to really understand your audience and optimizing for your campaigns is happening across the board, right? And I will say that marketers in general are usually pretty technology forward compared to some other personas, right? But now, even more so, data tools that were previously really expensive to purchase and maintain, they're starting to get easier for a marketer like myself who doesn't have that BI background in order to divest and understand to understand their investments in their programs. So data-driven marketing is one. I mentioned account-based marketing a little bit earlier as well, just making sure you find your high-value accounts and targets and being efficient with your resources. Content marketing is also, that was our first question. And of course, you need to make sure that you're strategic with high quality, informative content that can speak to your ideal customer's needs. And then finally, you mentioned this a little bit, but community building. This is often put at the bottom of the list because it's, a lot of companies, it's kind of an afterthought, right? But community building where you have a group, you start fostering your brand's image through customer testimonials, through, customer advisory board and partners and people who trust your brand is so key because it builds loyalty. And I say this everywhere I go, but if you can find the customers that are evangelists for your, you don't have to pay them to talk about your brand and they just love your product or your service or whatever you do, that is the best marketing that you can do. Because no matter what I say and I can talk about how awesome my company is all day long, but if you have third-party validation, that makes all the difference in the world. So I am a big advocate for building that core community.
I love that. Well, Han, as promised, these episodes go by quick. I have learned a ton. I feel like I'm finally kind of back in the game and feel like I can understand a little bit of what's going on. Han, I'm sure there's others that really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for the insights. If anyone wants to reach out and connect with you online, how and where can they find you?
Of course. I'm on LinkedIn. My name is easily searchable. I currently work at Lilt, but you can just shoot me an email at han.mai@lilt.com and I will respond accordingly.
Perfect. Well, Han, again, thank you so much for the time and insights today.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.